The Terran shipyard was silent. It had been silent for centuries, buried deep beneath layers of steel and forgotten history. Dust floated in the still air, and ancient machines stood frozen like statues of a time long gone. Most of the galaxy believed humanity had nothing left, just scattered colonies, old ships, and fading dreams. But under that silence, something stirred. At the center of the hidden dock rested a warship. Its hull was black as night, its surface smooth but marked with strange, glowing lines that pulsed faintly, as if the ship was alive. It was not large compared to the Empire's massive dreadnoughts. To alien eyes, it might even look small, outdated, weak. But appearances were lies. The warship had a name, carved into its side in ancient Terran letters, Invictus. 4 centuries it had slept, sealed away by humans who feared its power. Old Terran engineers had said, "This ship must never fly again, unless the galaxy forgets who we are." And now, that time had come. Inside the shipyard, hidden crews moved with quiet purpose. They wore no uniforms, no insignias. They were the descendants of warriors, scientists, and builders who had sworn to keep the last Terran warship alive. Generations had passed, and many had doubted if the day would ever come. But now, under the flicker of ancient lights, the order was clear. "Wake it," their commander said. The ground shook. Deep inside the warship, systems that had been cold for centuries lit up one by one. A low hum filled the air. Energy crackled along its hull. Dust fell from the ceiling as power surged through the dock. The black ship pulsed brighter, like a beast opening its eyes after a long sleep. The crew stepped back in awe. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare them for the sight of the Invictus alive again. The ship's engines roared. Slowly, with a weight that carried centuries of silence, the battleship lifted from its cradle. The dock trembled as the giant vessel hovered, shadows dancing across the walls. Then, with a burst of white light, it launched into the void. Across the galaxy, alarms triggered. On the far side of the Arcanis Empire, in a Fortress World command center, red lights flashed across a massive screen. Operators shouted in panic. Symbols scrolled across alien language displays. Unregistered warship detected. Origin, Sol system. Human territory. The alien general laughed. His scales glittered under the harsh light as he leaned back on his throne-like chair. One ship. A single human relic. That is what shakes the galaxy. Laughter spread among his officers. They remembered history the way the Empire wanted it remembered. Humans had been broken long ago, their fleets crushed, their armies scattered. To them, humanity was a shadow, barely worth notice. But not all were laughing. At the edge of the room, an old Arcanis scholar's skin paled. His hands trembled as he read the records. The name on his display burned into his mind, Invictus. He had seen it before, buried in ancient war reports the Empire never spoke of. He whispered, almost too softly to hear, "If that is truly the Invictus, the Empire is already doomed." Far above Earth, the Terran warship broke free of orbit. Its black hull shimmered against the stars. From the planet below, only a handful of people knew what had risen into the sky. They watched in silence, tears in their eyes, as the ship faded into the dark. It was more than a weapon. It was a reminder that humanity had not forgotten who they were. On board, the crew moved efficiently. They were not many, but they were chosen carefully. Every man and woman knew their role, and every one of them carried the weight of their ancestors. In the command chair sat Captain Darius Holt, a stern figure with eyes like steel. He looked at the glowing displays around him, each one confirming what he already knew, the galaxy had noticed. "They'll come for us," his second-in-command whispered. "They will," Holt said. His voice was calm, steady, unshaken. "And they'll think this is just one ship. Just one." He allowed himself a thin smile. "That is their mistake." In the Arcanis capital, the Emperor himself was informed. He was amused. One Terran warship rises, and the galaxy trembles. "Then let it come. Let my fleets swat this relic from the stars. Show the people that the humans are still weak." His advisors bowed, but not all shared his confidence. Rumors already spread like wildfire through the Empire. Reports came in from distant worlds, fear, whispers, panic. The word was always the same, Terran. The name carried weight. Not the weight of numbers, not of armies, but of something far older, fear. Every empire elder knew the truth. When humans fought, they fought to the end. And their weapons were never ordinary. The Invictus traveled silently through space, heading toward the first Empire fleet dispatched to intercept it. Its engines glowed, its black hull reflecting no starlight. To most of the galaxy, it was just a dark shadow. But inside, its crew felt the weight of destiny pressing down. One ship against an empire. It sounded impossible. But humanity had built it for that very reason. And as the Invictus moved into enemy space, the galaxy held its breath. The warship had awakened. And nothing would ever be the same again. The Arcanis fleet gathered like storm clouds. Hundreds of warships filled the black void, their hulls painted with the red and gold of the Empire. They stretched across space in endless formations, each bristling with cannons, missiles, and fighters. From a distance, it looked like a wall of firepower, a force designed to crush entire civilizations. And somewhere in that darkness, alone and silent, drifted the Invictus. One Terran ship. The Empire's admirals watched the black warship on their holoscreens with arrogant smiles. "This is what the galaxy fears," scoffed Admiral Velos, a broad-scaled alien whose voice rumbled with pride. "A relic from a dead world? Barely the size of a cruiser. It won't last 5 minutes." Laughter rippled through the command bridge. Officers leaned back in their seats, smug, relaxed, certain of victory before a single shot had been fired. Across the fleet, soldiers echoed their leader's arrogance. Pilots joked about who would be the first to destroy the human ship. Gun crews bet rations on how many seconds it would take before the Invictus was nothing but debris. To them, it was entertainment, an easy kill, a quick reminder that humans were finished. But not everyone laughed. At the far end of the Empire's flagship bridge, Scholar Varric studied the old records again. His scaled hands trembled as he turned the pages of a forbidden archive, one only he had dared to open. His voice was low, barely a whisper. "Invictus, it cannot be." He remembered the stories told only in hushed tones, stories the Empire had tried to erase. During the old wars, when the Arcanis had first risen to power, humans had unleashed ships like this one. Not fleets, just a handful of warships. And yet those ships had cut through entire armadas, leaving nothing but wreckage and silence. The Empire had won only by overwhelming numbers, sacrificing millions of lives just to bury the Terran threat. And when the humans finally disappeared into their ruined homeworld, the Empire had sworn never to speak of them again. But the stories had survived. And now, staring at the black silhouette of the Invictus, Varric's blood ran cold. On board the Invictus, Captain Darius Holt stood at the center of the command deck. Around him, glowing displays lit the faces of his crew. They watched the incoming readings, hundreds of ships, all moving to surround them. "Status report," Holt said calmly. "Engines steady," replied the chief engineer. "Shields are holding at full capacity. Weapons," she hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Weapons are eager." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the crew, but their eyes were sharp. They all knew what was coming. The Invictus was alone. Outnumbered. Outgunned. But not outmatched. "Remember this," Holt said, his voice carrying across the deck. "They will mock us. They will think we are weak. But Terrans do not fight for numbers. We fight for survival. And survival is something they cannot understand." The crew straightened in their seats, their hands firm on their stations. The first transmission came through. The Arcanis fleet opened a channel, and Admiral Velo's sneering face appeared in the holo-display. "Human captain," the alien growled. "You are surrounded. You are outnumbered. You are nothing. Power down your engines and surrender. If you obey, we will give your crew a merciful death. If you resist," his teeth gleamed in a cruel grin, "we will make it slow." Captain Holt stared at the alien, expressionless. Then he leaned forward. "You want a message to send back to your emperor?" Holt asked. His voice was steady, cold. The alien smirked. "Say your last words, human." Holt's eyes narrowed. Tell him, the Terrans have returned. The channel cut. The Empire's fleets roared with laughter at the defiance. Thousands of voices echoed through comms, mocking the humans. The admirals dismissed the words as the last desperate cry of a dying species. Yet deep inside, Scholar Varric shivered. He whispered the words to himself again. The Terrans have returned. He knew what they meant. To the Empire, they were a threat. But to the galaxy, they were a storm waiting to break. The fleets began their approach. Hundreds of Arcanis warships closed in, forming a tightening circle around the lone Terran vessel. Fighters swarmed ahead like insects, their engines burning bright against the stars. Enemy ships in range, reported the Invictus tactical officer. The crew braced. Silence fell across the command deck. Then Holt gave a single order. Hold fire. The Invictus drifted forward, black and silent. Its weapons remained dark. Its engines glowed faintly, but there was no aggression in its movement. To the Arcanis, it looked weak, pathetic, even. They're not firing, an alien commander scoffed. They're terrified. End this now. The order went out. The first wave of Arcanis warships opened fire. Beams of plasma and volleys of missiles streaked through space, converging on the Invictus. The stars lit up in brilliant explosions, the kind that usually tore ships apart in seconds. But when the smoke cleared, the Invictus was still there. Untouched. Its shields shimmered faintly, absorbing the storm of weapons fire as if it were nothing more than rain against glass. On the flagship, Admiral Velo's smile faded. Increase firepower, he snapped. A second wave. A third. Hundreds of cannons lit the void. Space itself seemed to shake with the fury of the Empire. And still, the Invictus endured. On board the Terran ship, the crew watched the storm batter harmlessly against their shields. One officer smirked. They really don't remember, do they? No, Holt said quietly. His eyes glowed in the reflection of the displays. But they will. For hours, the Empire mocked, laughed, and raged. They thought the humans were trapped, helpless, waiting to be destroyed. But the Invictus did not fall. The longer it endured, the more the laughter faded. Doubt spread. Fear followed. And slowly, whispers began to ripple across the fleets. Whispers of old stories, of ancient warnings, of a truth buried by time. Never underestimate a Terran battleship. By the time the Invictus powered its weapons, the galaxy itself seemed to be watching. The moment had come. And the mocking would end. The storm of fire had ended. For 3 endless hours, the Arcanis fleet poured every weapon they had into the lone Terran warship. Plasma beams, fusion missiles, railgun slugs, everything. Space itself had burned with their fury, until even nearby stars seemed dim against the chaos. And yet the Invictus still floated in the darkness. Not destroyed. Not even damaged. Its black hull gleamed faintly against the dying light of the last explosions. Its shields shimmered only once before settling back into silence. On the Arcanis flagship, Admiral Velos gripped the edge of his command chair, his claws digging into the metal. His confident grin was gone, replaced by something colder. Something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. This is impossible, one of his officers stammered. No ship can withstand that. Not even. Velos turned on him sharply. Silence. His voice echoed across the bridge. But even as he barked the order, he could not stop the thought that filled every mind in the room. Not even the humans. On board the Invictus, the silence was different. It was calm. Focused. The crew had sat through the hours of bombardment with steady hands, their captain's voice guiding them. They had listened to the Empire's fury as if it were nothing more than a storm outside their walls. And now, as the firing stopped, every eye turned to Captain Darius Holt. He rose from his chair, his face grim but steady. They've had their chance, Holt said. His voice was calm, controlled, but beneath the calm was iron. Now we answer. The tactical officer's hands hovered above his console. Orders, Captain. Holt's eyes narrowed, locked on the massive formation of warships filling the void. Target their command vessels, he said. Let the Empire see who they're dealing with. The Invictus came alive. Its black hull glowed as ancient systems awakened, systems long dormant, systems the galaxy had forgotten. Weapon ports slid open like eyes, revealing cannons that burned with an unnatural blue light. Massive rail batteries hummed with deadly energy. Hidden launch bays opened, preparing their payloads. The silence broke. With one order, the Invictus fired. The first shot was not plasma. Not a missile. It was a railgun slug, accelerated to near-light speed, wrapped in magnetic force so dense it bent space around it. The slug tore through the void faster than the Arcanis sensors could track. On the flagship, alarms screamed, but it was already too late. The rail slug hit a cruiser head-on. There was no explosion. No fire. No debris. The cruiser simply vanished. Its hull, its crew, its weapons, gone in an instant, shredded into atoms by the force of the impact. Silence fell across the Arcanis fleet. One shot. One ship erased. Then came the second strike. The Invictus unleashed a storm of blue fire. Beams lanced out across space, slicing through shields, armor, and hulls as if they were paper. Entire destroyers were cut in half in seconds. Carriers burned from within as their fuel cores ruptured. Fighters evaporated in clouds of light. For every shot the Empire had fired in 3 hours, the Invictus answered with a single, precise, merciless strike. And every strike was a kill. On the flagship, Admiral Velos roared in fury, but his voice cracked with panic. All ships. Advance. Overwhelm it. Now. But even as he shouted, he knew. Numbers did not matter. The Terrans had built something beyond numbers. Inside the fleet, panic spread. Pilots who had mocked the humans only hours ago now screamed in fear as their squadrons were wiped out in seconds. Captains who had laughed at the relic begged for retreat as their ships collapsed into fire. And through it all, the Invictus moved with terrifying grace. It did not rush. It did not flinch. It struck like a predator, calm, deliberate, unstoppable. Scholar Varric stood frozen at his station, his scaled hands trembling. The forbidden stories filled his mind, clearer now than ever before. He remembered the words of the elders, whispered only in secret. One Terran ship is an army. One Terran fleet is the end of empires. His voice broke as he whispered to himself, the legends were true. And then louder, almost in horror, the Terrans have not returned, they never left. Back on the Invictus, Captain Holt watched as enemy ships burned. His crew moved with mechanical precision, executing every command with perfect timing. Enemy flagship? Holt asked. Shields failing, the tactical officer replied. They're exposed. Holt nodded once. End it. The Invictus charged a single shot. Energy gathered at the prow, building brighter and brighter until even the stars seemed dim. The void itself shook as the ancient weapon came online. The Arcanis fleet scrambled to defend their flagship. Cruisers threw themselves in front of it, shields raised, weapons blazing. But it was useless. The Invictus fired. A beam of blue-white energy cut through the darkness like a sword through water. The defending cruisers melted instantly, their hulls dissolving into nothing. The flagship's shields flared, shattered, and the beam tore straight through its heart. The ship exploded in silence, a sun blooming in the void, scattering burning wreckage across space. The Empire's command was gone. The battlefield froze. Hundreds of Arcanis warships remained, but none moved. None fired. The silence of space was deeper than ever before, filled only with the drifting echoes of burning ships. On board the Invictus, Holt's eyes hardened. He knew what would happen next. Fear. Panic. Collapse. The Empire had mocked humanity. Now they would remember humanity. And this was only the beginning. The light of the destroyed flagship still burned in the void. A shattered sun, glowing wreckage drifting across the battlefield. For the Arcanis fleet, it was more than the loss of a ship. It was the loss of their pride. Their strength. Their Empire's unshakable will. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire trembled. On the bridge of a surviving battleship, Captain Yaren's claws shook as he gripped the controls. He could hear his crew shouting for orders, but his throat was dry, his mind blank. Moments ago, they had been an unstoppable force. Hundreds of ships against one. Now, the one ship had gutted them. The words slipped from his mouth before he even realized it. Retreat. Across the fleet, panic spread like wildfire. Fighters broke formation, scattering in every direction. Frigates overloaded their engines, fleeing toward the nearest jump point. Some ships fired blindly at the Invictus, but their shots glanced harmlessly off its shields. Others turned on each other in the chaos, collisions ripping hulls apart. The Empire had always been united in discipline. But now it was a stampede. On the Arcanis homeworld, in the vast halls of the Imperial Senate, the battle was broadcast live. Holoscreens filled the chamber, showing the lone Terran warship carving through the pride of their navy. Senators shouted, their voices filled with terror. Where did they come from? Why is one ship doing this? The humans were extinct. The High Chancellor rose, his scaled face pale, his robes shaking as he pointed to the images. This is no ordinary warship. This is a Terran relic. The old stories, the ones we forbade, they were warnings. His words silenced the chamber. Everyone had heard the stories as hatchlings, whispered by elders before being silenced by the Empire's censors. Stories of the Terrans. Stories of the war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. Stories of the ships that fought like gods. And now, those stories had come alive. On the battlefield, the Invictus advanced. It did not chase the fleeing ships with rage. It moved slowly, methodically, like a predator conserving its strength. Every time a ship broke formation, the Invictus fired one shot, clean, precise, final. A destroyer split in half. A frigate erased. A carrier burned from within. The message was clear. You cannot run. You cannot hide. Admiral Velos, blood dripping from his wounded claws, struggled to his feet on the ruined bridge of a support cruiser. His flagship was gone, his fleet collapsing, his empire trembling. But his pride still burned. No, he roared. We are the Arcanis. We will not bow to myth. He turned to his officers, but their eyes betrayed him. They were afraid. They no longer saw him as their leader. They saw him as a doomed man. And deep inside, Velos knew the truth. The Empire had met something it could not control. Inside the Invictus, Captain Holt sat tall in his command chair, his voice calm as the crew executed every command. Status of the enemy? Holt asked. Disorganized. Fleeing, his officer replied. Dozens of ships retreating toward jump coordinates. Some are abandoning the field entirely. Holt nodded once. His face was hard, but his voice carried no joy. Only purpose. Good. Let them run. Let them carry the message home. The scholar Varric, who had been forced to serve aboard the Empire's fleet, now sat shaking in silence. He watched as his people's proud armada collapsed, and the words of his ancestors filled his ears. He whispered again, louder this time, so that even the officers around him could hear. The humans were never gone. The Terrans waited. And now, they've returned for the reckoning. His voice cracked. This is the moment the galaxy will remember. The officers stared at him in horror. Not because he was wrong, but because they all knew he was right. News spread faster than light. Even as the battle raged, fragments of the broadcast leaked across the Empire's communication networks. Merchants, soldiers, children, everyone saw the image of one Terran ship destroying the Empire's pride. Across alien worlds, whispers began. The humans are back. The myths were true. What happens when the rest of their fleet awakens? The Invictus fired one last shot. A massive Arcanis battleship, retreating at full burn, exploded into a silent bloom of fire. The debris drifted into the void like falling ash. Then the Terran warship stopped firing. It hung in silence, its weapons glowing faintly, its shields humming like the breath of a sleeping beast. Captain Holt gave no pursuit. He had made his point. For the survivors, the silence was worse than fire. Hundreds of Arcanis ships limped away, broken and terrified. Crews whispered prayers, captains wept at their consoles, and officers begged their governments for answers. The Empire had sent its greatest fleet. It had been broken by one ship. And in that moment, the galaxy changed. On the Invictus bridge, Holt stood, his eyes fixed on the stars. His crew waited for orders, their faces pale but steady. "Sir," his first officer asked quietly. "What now?" Holt's expression was unreadable, his voice low. "Now," he said, "we remind the galaxy what humanity is." The Invictus drifted silently in space. Its black hull reflected no light, like a shadow carved into the stars. The Arcanis survivors had fled, their fleets shattered, their pride broken. But the Terran warship did not chase them. It did not need to. The message had already been sent. In the command chamber of the Arcanis Senate, silence reigned. The holoscreens still showed the wreckage of their destroyed fleet, the glowing outline of the Terran ship standing alone. The High Chancellor's voice cracked as he spoke. "One ship destroyed our entire armada." An elderly senator, scales pale with age, leaned forward. His voice trembled, but it carried the weight of memory. "I told you this day would come," he whispered. "The Terrans were never weak. They were only sleeping. And we have awakened them." Whispers filled the chamber. Impossible. Their species was erased. They burned themselves out in their wars. They cannot still exist. But deep in their hearts, none of them believed it anymore. The legends had returned. Meanwhile, aboard the Invictus, Captain Holt stood before a glowing console. His crew worked in silence, fear and/or written across their faces. "Status of the reactor?" Holt asked. "Stable," the engineer replied. "Energy levels, beyond anything we've seen before. It's like the ship is alive." Holt's gaze lingered on the strange pulsing light that flowed through the walls. The Invictus was not just a warship. It was something more. Something older. Something waiting. In the archives of humanity, long before the fall of Earth, ships like the Invictus were built as guardians. They were called Sentinels. Each Sentinel held within it not only weapons but memories, databases of human history, strategies, and the recorded minds of old commanders. They were not merely machines of war. They were vessels of humanity itself. And this one had just awakened. The first officer, Lieutenant Aria, broke the silence. "Sir, the galaxy has seen us now. What happens when they realize this ship is not alone?" Holt's eyes narrowed. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "Then they will remember what it means to face humanity." Across the stars, fear spread faster than light. Merchants closed their trade routes. Frontier colonies locked down their ports. Pirate bands abandoned raids and fled into deep space. Everywhere, the same words were spoken in hushed voices. "The Terrans are back." On some worlds, people cheered. Old species who had once fought alongside humans whispered with hope. On others, rulers panicked, knowing their empires had been built on the assumption that Terrans were gone forever. Now, the foundation of their power cracked. On a hidden world, deep within a nebula, a secret meeting took place. Alien leaders gathered in shadows, far from prying eyes. A Caloran warlord slammed his fist against the table. "We must unite before it's too late. If one ship can do this, what will happen when their fleets rise?" A Serathai priest hissed in fear. "The old prophecies warned of this. Humanity will return when arrogance fills the stars. The reckoning is upon us." But not all were afraid. A young Valari commander leaned forward, his silver eyes bright. "Maybe this is not the end. Maybe this is the beginning. If the humans are back, perhaps they will lead us again." The chamber erupted in chaos. Back on the Invictus, Holt stood in the war room. The holographic display showed not just the destroyed Arcanis fleet, but maps of the entire galaxy. Red markers lit up empires, colonies, fleets. The ship was already scanning, already planning. "Sir," Arya said, her voice cautious. "Why now? Why did the Invictus awaken after centuries?" Holt looked at the glowing core in the center of the room. The pulsing light seemed to respond to his gaze, almost as if it was aware. "Because," Holt said, "the galaxy finally forgot to fear us. And the Invictus remembered." In the lower decks, some of the younger crew whispered among themselves. "Is it true? Are there more ships like this? They say Earth had dozens, maybe hundreds." "No. They say thousands. The thought made them fall silent. One ship had shattered an empire's fleet. What would thousands do? Meanwhile, on Arcanis Prime, riots began. Citizens who had been told for centuries that Terrans were a myth now demanded answers. Some cried out for peace, begging their leaders to surrender before it was too late. Others screamed for war, demanding vengeance, blind to the fear in their rulers' eyes. The empire that had stood unshaken for millennia now shook on its foundations. Holt turned to his crew. "We will not strike blindly. The Invictus is not a weapon of conquest. It is a reminder." "Of what, sir?" Arya asked softly. Holt's eyes burned with quiet fire. "That humanity is not gone. That we are eternal. And if the galaxy has forgotten, we will make them remember." The Invictus began to move again, its engines glowing with silent power. The stars stretched before it, endless and waiting. For the Arcanis Empire, the battle was lost. For the galaxy, the game had changed. And for humanity, the revelation had only just begun. The galaxy held its breath. Every species, every empire, every ruler stared at the dark shape drifting through the stars. The Invictus. A Terran warship, alive after centuries. A legend made real. Some prayed. Some panicked. Some plotted. But none could ignore the truth. Humanity had returned. On Arcanis Prime, the High Chancellor addressed his people. His voice shook as he spoke. "We are not defeated," he lied. "The Terran ship is only one vessel. We will rebuild our fleets. We will crush them." But in the Senate chamber, his words rang hollow. Even his generals avoided his eyes. They had seen the truth on the battle screens. One Terran battleship had done what entire empires could not. And deep in their hearts, they feared the rumors. What if there are more? Aboard the Invictus, Captain Holt studied the galaxy map. Red markers spread across the stars, empires that had risen during humanity's silence. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. "Sir," Lieutenant Arya said quietly, "the Arcanis are rallying. They're gathering allies. They won't stop until they destroy us." Holt's jaw tightened. "Then we show them the truth. Not just about this ship. About who we are." The crew gathered in the war room. Holograms flickered images of human history, battles fought, sacrifices made. The Invictus displayed them as if reminding its own crew of what they carried. "Look around you," Holt told them. "This ship isn't just metal and weapons. It's memory. It's the weight of our people. The galaxy thinks we died. But humanity does not die. We endure. We adapt. We return." The crew stood taller. Fear was still in their eyes, but also fire. Then the signal came. A challenge, broadcast across the stars. The Arcanis had formed a grand alliance. Dozens of fleets gathered, drawn by fear, greed, or desperation. Ships filled the void like a sea of steel. The Arcanis commander's voice thundered across the comms. "Terran vessel, surrender. Or be erased." The crew of the Invictus looked to Holt. He smiled a cold, quiet smile. "Let them try." The battle began. Waves of alien ships surged forward. Energy beams lanced through space. Missiles streaked like falling stars. The Invictus did not retreat. Its hull shimmered, absorbing fire that would have shredded worlds. Its cannons lit up, hurling bolts of plasma that tore fleets apart. Entire cruisers vanished in white fire. Still, they came. Dozens. Hundreds. The alliance was vast, a storm of ships blotting out the stars. But the Invictus was not just a ship. It was a sentinel. Activating deep core systems, the engineer shouted. The ship answered with a low, rising hum. The walls pulsed with light, as if the vessel's very heart had awakened. Suddenly, the Invictus split the darkness with a weapon the galaxy had not seen in 1,000 years. A lance of pure energy cut across the void. One beam. One strike. An entire fleet vanished in silence. The stars burned brighter where they had been. On alien command bridges, officers screamed in disbelief. "No weapon can do that. It's impossible. They are breaking the laws of physics." But it was not impossible. It was Terran. Still, the battle raged. The Alliance threw everything at the warship: drones, carriers, siege platforms. The Invictus fought like a beast awakened from slumber, every strike precise, every move deadly. Inside, the crew pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. Hands shook. Eyes burned. But no one faltered. Because they knew the truth. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for all of humanity. Then, as the Alliance's last desperate wave approached, the Invictus unleashed its final secret. From its hull, smaller vessels detached, sleek, angular ships, hidden for centuries within its frame. They spread like wings of fire. The crew gasped. "Sir, those are Terran frigates." "No, not just frigates. They're drones. Controlled by the Invictus itself." The sky filled with light as the drones struck, moving as one mind, one will. The Alliance broke. The Arcanis flagship burned. The Grand Alliance collapsed into chaos. And the stars belonged once more to humanity. When silence finally returned, the battlefield was littered with wreckage. Hulks of alien warships drifted lifeless in the void. But the Invictus still stood. Black. Silent. Eternal. In the command chamber, Holt looked at his weary crew. "It's over," Arya whispered. "No," Holt said, his voice steady. "This was only the beginning. The galaxy has seen our strength. Now they will choose. Fear us, or follow us." And across the stars, the message spread. The Terrans are back. One ship stood against an empire and won. What happens when the rest awaken? On forgotten worlds, old Terran bunkers stirred. Hidden vaults lit up. Engines that had not burned in centuries hummed to life. The Invictus was not alone. It was only the first. The reckoning had begun. Humanity had returned to the stars. And this time, they would not be forgotten.